Hey creeps, it's Cameron again, and welcome back to another episode of Library Macabre. Lately, I have been getting back into reading vintage young adult horror books from like the 80s and 90s. So think Fear Street, Point Horror, Christopher Pike, all of those golden age books that I had when I was a kid. And lately, I've just been in the mood to get back to my childhood and just experience those simple feelings all over again. So that also means I have been buying quite a lot of vintage young adult horror. So I have a haul for you, a giant haul of vintage young adult horror books right after this. So what I have here is a giant stack of Point Horror books. And for those who somehow don't know what Point Horror is, Point Horror was a series that was published in the late 80s, early 90s. These books were published monthly, and there were a group of authors that contributed. So you had authors like Christopher Pike, R.L. Stine, Richie Tinkersley Cusick, Diane Ho, just to name a few. And these books consisted of murder mysteries, books about paranormal entities coming back from the grave and getting revenge. We also had vampires. It was just a run-of-the-mill, just all kinds of horror for teens. And they were among my favorite books to read as a kid. I read several, and yet still only scratched the surface. There are many books that I never read, and there are many books that I never even bought because, like I said, it came out monthly, and these books went on to like 1996 and then continued on in other forms in some spin-off series and whatnot. So the past couple of months I've been going back and trying to collect some of the books that I missed when I was a kid and fill in the gaps in my collection. I am also trying to find first editions of many of these books in the best condition possible. So I am going to start off with the earliest book I have. This one was from 1987. It is called The Haunting of Francis Rain by Margaret Buffy. And I had never heard of this one. I had never seen it before until I ran across it in a bookstore for $1. It's a really, really nice copy. Unfortunately, it's a second printing, so I would like to get a first printing of this one eventually, but it was so cheap that I went ahead and picked it up. Really looking forward to reading this one. It seems a little bit different from most of the Point Horror books. This one seems more of just like a straightforward ghost story. I believe this girl puts on an old pair of glasses and she can see ghosts. From 1989, we have Prom Dress by Lyle Litkey. This one is basically about a girl who puts on an evil haunted dress and madness ensues. When I was in school, I never went to dances. I hated the idea of going to prom, and yet anything that takes place at a prom, especially in the 80s or 90s, I don't know. I love it. I hate dances in real life, but I love them when it comes to movies and books. I was really excited to find this. From 1989, we have The Babysitter by R.L. Stine. And now this is one of my favorite Point Horror books. I would say it's the best that I have ever read. I loved this book when I was a kid. I love the entire Babysitter series. And my copy from my childhood is very well loved. It's very torn apart. And I was just really wanting to get a nice first edition copy. And I found one on eBay. This is a beautiful, beautiful first printing, and I am so happy to have it. There is a Point Horror TV show that is coming on HBO Max really soon. I believe the end of this year or maybe next year. And I also heard that there's going to be a Babysitter TV show. So I don't know if The Babysitter is just going to be an episode of the Point Horror series or if it's going to be its own thing. I'm not totally sure. Either way, I am really excited. Speaking of The Babysitter, we have The Babysitter 3 by R.L. Stine. This is another one that I already had a copy of, but I really wanted a first printing, and I found this for $1 at a bookstore. I was really happy to find this. It's in really nice shape. There's just a little crease on the front cover, but otherwise it looks really nice. And the tagline of this one is, "He still wants her, alive or dead." That's always one of my favorite things about these books is the cheesy taglines. Also from 1989, we have Party Line by A. Bates. Your next phone call could be your last. This is one that I always wanted to read as a kid, but I never got to it, so I'm really looking forward to digging into this one. Another one from 1989 is a Halloween title, and that is Trick or Treat by Richie Tinkersley Cusick. Trick or treat, candy is dandy, but murder is sweet. This is a really good one. I actually read this one a couple of years ago and loved it. Jumping forward to 1991, we have The Accident by Diane Ho, another really, really good point horror book. She has returned from the dead. And this is basically about this teenage girl who, I believe she's about to celebrate her 17th birthday, and she finds out that there's this mirror in her bedroom that is haunted by the ghost of a girl who died in the lake down the street from her house. She died in some boating accident, and the girl makes a deal with this ghost and agrees to let the ghost possess her body so that way this ghost can finally live out her own 17th birthday. So obviously things don't go quite as planned and the ghost might not be as friendly as she appears. This was just a lot of fun. It's really weird, so I highly recommend that one if you want to check out some point horror. Another one from 1991 is Sister Dearest by D.E. Atkins. I've always loved that pen name, Deathkins. I just think that's really epic. This is actually a replacement for my other copy. I had another copy of this and it was in pretty nice shape, but this one is just perfect. It's in beautiful condition. I found this for $1 at Half Price Books. This next one I actually got for free from an Etsy seller. I was buying a whole bunch of point horror books from them, and they said that there was a tear on the spine that they had missed, and they said that I could just have it for free, which was really nice of them, considering the tear is not a big deal at all. This one is Nightmare Hall, book number 13 by Diane Ho, Monster. And these books are awesome. They have these really cool die-cut covers. And just look at that. That is awesome. I had a copy of this one already, but it was a horrible copy. It had a big tear through the cover and halfway through the book. It was awful. So I'm glad I have a really nice first edition copy to replace that other one. Night School by Caroline B. Cooney. Caroline B. Cooney is one of my favorite authors. She wrote one of my favorite books called The Face on the Milk Carton, and she wrote several titles for the point horror series. This is one that I had never read before. This one was much later. It's from 1995, and the tagline of this one says, "There are no graduates from this school ever." And next we have a duo. This is from 1995, and it is the Vampires Love series. I believe there were only 2 books in this series. So we have Vampires Love, Blood Curse, and Blood Spell. So books number 1 and 2. These are really, really nice copies. I found these at a bookstore for like $1, $1.50. So I'm glad I found those. These look a lot different from the other point horror books. These look more like paranormal romance. But I do love the covers. They're super cheesy. They look fun. And next I have 5 more point horror books, but these are actually the UK editions, which I really like. I really like the UK editions. They actually had a banner that said point horror, so you knew exactly what you were getting. They just have a more uniform look than the US editions. So I really like these, and I'd like to collect as many of the UK editions as I can. I actually got these off of Etsy from a seller. So we have Beach Party by R.L. Stine. And also I just want to say these books are in beautiful condition. Like, they were never read, so they are brand new looking, and I'm really excited to read this one in the summertime. I've never read this one before. I did read Beach House when I was a kid, but Beach Party was one that I was never able to find. So there's that one from 1991. From 1995, we have The Surfer by Linda Cargill. This cover is completely different from the US version, but I actually prefer the UK edition. I just think that's really cool with the scratch marks going through the surfboard. This next one was published in the US in 1994, but this edition is from 1995, and that is The Diary by Sinclair Smith. And I believe this one didn't just have a completely different cover in the US, but I think it had a completely different title. I think the title in the US is like Let Me Tell You How I Died or something. The US cover is really cool, but I like this one too. I think I like them equally. Next we have a couple by Richie Tinkersley Cusick. So we have Fatal Secrets and Help Wanted. Both of these were not actually published as point horror books in the US. They were actually published by Archway Paperbacks. So they were their own books. They weren't part of any series. But then in the UK, they were published under the point horror umbrella, and they also have completely different covers here in the States. I think I have I think I have Fatal Secrets in the US edition, and it's totally different, but also really good. And then the last point horror book that I have to show you is from the Mutant point horror series. This one is called Flyblown. This is a UK exclusive series. It was never published in the States that I know of, and it's really rare. These books are super hard to find, and they're very expensive online, but I was able to find this at a used bookstore for $1 or $2. I was shocked. I couldn't believe that I was able to find this. So it's a really, really nice copy, and I am dying to have the other books. So if anybody knows where I can find these somewhere other than eBay where they're super expensive, please let me know. Next up, we have some Fear Street. Of course, Fear Street was another one of my favorite series when I was a kid. I just loved these books so much. They're so trashy and fun. These are all written by R.L. Stine, who of course wrote the Goosebumps series. Fear Street was like his series for teens. I have a big collection of his books here behind me, and I'm still trying to collect the rest that I'm missing. So I've been able to find a few more first editions, all in really nice condition. So we have a beautiful first edition copy of The Secret Bedroom, which is one of my favorite covers. Next we have Goodnight Kiss. This one is actually a super chiller of the Fear Street series. It's got that very seductive 90s cover art. This one's about vampires. The tagline is, "Their first kiss could be her last." Next is The Dare. Some girls will do anything for a guy, even kill. And I actually just read this one and loved it. It was a really good time. Next we have Bad Dreams, and this is kind of a Nightmare on Elm Street kind of twist. And I love that cover. That's always one of my favorites. I love the pinks and the reds. Reminds me of Valentine's Day. Dead End. Haven't read this one, but it looks pretty good. Tagline is, "There's no going back." Switched. I actually got this one to replace my other copy that wasn't in the best shape. I hear that this is one of the best Fear Street books, but I've actually never read this one before. I'll definitely get to it though. Next we have books 1 and 2 in the Cataluna Chronicles trilogy. So the first one is The Evil Moon, and the second one is The Dark Secret. And I do have the third book, which is called The Deadly Fire, so I now have the complete trilogy. Next is The First Scream, which is the first book in the Fear Park trilogy. I have the other 2 books, so again, I have a completed trilogy now. And last, for the Fear Street series, we have Who Killed the Homecoming Queen, which is one that I have been looking for years. So happy to finally have it. Those are all for the Fear Street books, but I do have a couple more R.L. Stine books. This one is Broken Date. It was originally published in 1988 as part of some kind of other young adult series. I can't remember what it was called though, and then they reprinted it in its own edition. So there's Broken Date. I also got a brand new looking copy of Goosebumps Triple Header by R.L. Stine. I do have a copy of this already from when I was a kid, but my copy is all worn out, so this is a really nice one to replace my other one. And then I also found this at a used bookstore, and I had to pick it up just because it was weird. This is book 8 of the Goosebumps series. It is The Girl Who Cried a Monster, which was always one of my favorite books. And this is like a library edition. It's hardcover, and I love hardcover books, so I was like, yeah, I'll go ahead and pick that up for $1. But the thing is, there's a big error halfway through the book. Starting at page 90, it suddenly shifts to page 27. And the whole middle section of the book is missing. So you have a reprinted section of the book. So this is basically useless, but it's kind of I guess a Goosebumps oddity, if you will. Another one of my favorite authors from the 80s and 90s was Christopher Pike. And I have most of his books now. I'm still filling in a couple of gaps, but for the most part, I have first editions of all of his books. One of them that I was missing was Final Friends, book number 3, The Graduation. I have the first book, and I'm still looking for the second one, but now I have the third. Next is The Grave. Now this one is actually a really rare book. It's one of his later books that he published, and I had actually never heard of it until I was searching on eBay for his books and suddenly saw this listed. I had never heard of it before, and I went ahead and bought it, even though it was kind of expensive. It was listed for $45, and I put in an offer for like $25, and fortunately they accepted it. It was still a lot of money, but I'm glad that I didn't have to spend $40. It's Beautiful copy though. I also got The Immortal by Christopher Pike. There is a hardcover edition of this that I would like to get eventually, but this is a really nice paperback to hold me over until then. And then we have Chain Letter to the Ancient Evil. And I was so happy to find this. I found this at a used bookstore for $1. Couldn't believe it. This is a hardcover first edition of The Last Vampire for Phantom. These hardcovers are so hard to find. Like, I hardly ever see them pop up. And when I do, it's usually on eBay for $30, $1. I can't believe I was able to find this. So cool. And then I also got one of his Spooksville books. This is number 5 in the series, The Cold People. Next up, we have a few more random young adult horror books. I have one of Lois Duncan's books here. Lois Duncan is always one of my favorite authors. This one is called They Never Came Home. It's one of the ones that I've never read before. And I'm trying to collect all of her books in these editions because they have, I think, the best covers and they all look really nice on the shelf together. They have this uniform look. So I have almost all of these. I'm only missing a couple. I think I'm missing Summer of Fear, Daughters of Eve, and Locked in Time, I believe, and then I'll have all of them. Next we have one of the Terror Academy books. This one is called School Spirit by Nicholas Pine. I've heard a lot of things about this series, especially lately after Grady Hendrix read the series, and he said that it's really violent and gory and totally not what you would expect from a young adult series. I actually have a nice little handful of this series collected so far, but I am missing a couple, trying to find those elsewhere. Next we have book number 3 in the Midnight Secrets series. This one is called The Fury, kind of a witchy series from the 90s. I already had a copy of this, but this one is in much better shape than my other one. Finally found the first book in the Vampire Twins series. This one's called Bloodlines. I found the other 3 books and all I was missing was the first one, and I finally found a really nice first edition copy in beautiful condition. I also picked up one of the books from the Twilight Where Darkness Begins series. This one is from the early 80s. This is book number 13 in that series, called Vicious Cycle. Number 4 in the Samantha Slade series, The Terrors of Rock and Roll. This one's a bit less horror, but it's still got the spooky elements going on. Next we have a couple of L.J. Smith books. L.J. Smith wrote the Vampire Diaries, so we have book 2 in her Dark Visions series, The Possessed, and one of the books in the Night World series, The Chosen. Here we have a Archway paperback. This one is called Terror Runs Deep. It is by Richard Posner. It was the perfect summer job until it turned deadly. So this one will be a good one to read in the summertime. By John Peel, we have Maniac. This is another Archway paperback, and it says, Who or what is stealing their minds? Here we have a few books from the Forbidden Doors series. So this was a Christian horror book series in the 90s. I had never heard of it before until I accidentally stumbled on the first book a couple of months ago. And lately I've been finding copies of the books out in the wild. So I found one and now suddenly they're everywhere. So I found a couple more for like $1 each. I found book 2, which is called The Deceived, book 4, which is called The Haunting, and book 5, which is called The Guardian. Look at that awful cover. It's like a drawing of a girl, and then around her we have this guardian angel, and it's like a photograph of some dude photoshopped around the drawing of the girl. It looks horrible. Horrible. I actually like the covers for these ones. These aren't too bad, but this is just trash, and I love it. Next up, we have a couple of young adult horror books published by Avon Flare in the 90s. This one is called First Kiss. It is book 1 of the Final Cruise series by Nicole Davidson. I've heard a lot of good things about Nicole Davidson's books, actually. So this one looks great. I love those pastel colors. I love just the simple image of her looking over her shoulder and seeing something terrible, but us not knowing what it is. It's a great 90s YA trope. By Barbara Steiner, we have The Photographer 2, The Dark Room. He'll capture her beauty forever. I don't have the first one, but I am keeping my eyes peeled. This one kind of looks like a V.C. Andrews ripoff. We have Dying to Know by Jeff Hammer. And next up, Secrets to Tell. This is by Anne Gabhart. Never heard of that one, never heard of the author, but I will buy anything I see that is 90s YA horror, and I will read it, whether it's bad or not. And lastly, I have a stack of random middle grade horror books. So these aren't young adult, but they're close enough. So we have Hunted. This is by Larry Weinberg. It's about a kid who's being stalked by his scary next door neighbor. We have one of the books from the Graveyard School series, Let's Scare the Teacher to Death. I've read a couple of the books from the series and they're good fun. Another Goosebumps knockoff is Dead Time Stories Fairy Tale. This is number 17. I have the first 12 books in the series, and then after that book, it seemed like these got a lot rarer, like there weren't as many in print. So I was really happy to find one of the later books finally. This one's part of the Strange Matter series that is called Second Sighting. We have book number 7 in the Outer Limits series for kids. This is The Vanished by John Peel, who also wrote Maniac. So he wrote a lot of books for teens and kids. Bruce Coville's Book of Ghosts, Book 2, More Tales to Haunt You. I have the first one, so I'm really glad to have found the second book. Love that cover. Scared Stiff by Joanna N. Malcolm. I had a copy of this one already, but it wasn't a first printing. This one is. And then the last book I have here is actually much, much older. This one looks like it's from the 70s. Yeah, 1972. 10 Tales Calculated to Give You Shudders. This was published by Whitman. A much, much older book, but it's in really nice, solid shape, and I'm excited to read it. I always love these old children's ghost story anthologies. So there you have it, creeps. That is my young adult, middle grade horror book haul. Really excited to add all of these to my collection. If any of you have read any of these, please let me know what you thought, because a lot of these I have not read before. And if you liked this haul and you want to see another one, check back on Wednesday, because I have another book haul of all of my adult horror books that I got in the month of January. Also, don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe if you would like to see more episodes of Library Macabre. Until next time, later, creeps.